It's a weird one because in a way the rest of the breweries and stuff that kind of they're playing checkers, you're playing chess. It's the same industry but a different game.
Yeah, we found that a lot when we were starting because we didn't come from beer backgrounds. This is all we've known. We drink other styles. I know the theory behind their construction, but I'm not a brewer. I never pretended to be. Bar a bit of home brewing, and I really love the blending side here.
Do you utilise the term basket vinegar around here?
No, we don't.
Beer you brew and the processes you use to brew it is very traditional. How would you describe what you do? Can you give us an idiot's guide to the crossover method?
Sure. It's a bit complicated what we do. We're very much making beer. It's made with malted barley and raw wheat. But there are a few bits of the process which are different. And one of the key things that differentiates our beer to normal beer is that it's fermented with wild yeast and bacteria. But we don't add the wild yeast and bacteria. We don't add the cultures into the unfermented beer to get it to ferment. It's actually a completely wild process. So the beers are spontaneously fermented, meaning you're relying on wild yeast and bacteria to get into the unfermented beer, which then goes on to ferment it. And to do that, one of the parts of our brew process is after the wort, the unfermented beer, is being boiled and you add your hops. Normally you'd put it through a cooler or a chiller unit and it would go into a fermenting vessel. But with us, we actually allow the wort to cool in these open trays called coolships or cooling trays. We call them cooling trays in the UK.
So you do use coolships then?
Yes, yeah, they're fundamental to our process in that because we're not pitching in any yeast or bacteria, by allowing the wort to cool in these shallow open trays, and we let them cool overnight. It's normally about 15 hours of cooling, so a long period of time. We brew only in the winter, so that speeds up the cooling. We turn the wort out at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It gets taken off 9, 10 the next day. So it's a long, long period. If you do that in summer, you've got a warmer daytime temperature and it would elongate that process even more. But yes, so this cooling in the trays over the 15-hour period, you're exposing the wort to its natural surroundings. So all of the native yeast and bacteria that's present in the room, we open up the windows so it comes in from outside as well. All of that will fall into or land in the wort while it's cooling. And that's your inoculation. That's your spontaneous inoculation. And it's that process which will then allow the beers to spontaneously ferment.
Wow.
Or the wort to then spontaneously ferment and become beer. And all of that spontaneous fermentation happens here in the barrels. So it doesn't ferment in the tank and then we move it into the barrels. All of the fermentation and maturation will happen in barrels. So once the wort, the unfermented beer, has gone into the barrel, we don't touch it. It'll start fermenting, and then we leave it until it's ready to use.
I guess that's the key difference between what you do and perhaps more classical wild fermentation or mixed ferm approach.
Yeah, you don't want to get bogged down in it, but the beers we make are mixed fermentation. There's a mixed culture of yeast and bacteria that's operating in it. But the big thing is these are spontaneously fermented, meaning we're not adding in a mixed culture.
That's how you
it's
describe
totally
yourself,
wild.
I guess, as a brewery then, a spontaneous fermentation brewery as opposed to a mixed or wild fermentation brewery.
Exactly, yeah. So, we're very inspired by the Lambic producers in Belgium, but out of respect for what they do and producers over there that have been helpful in setting this project up, we don't call the beer Lambic, which can be quite frustrating at times because it's quite hard to describe these beers. Spontaneously fermented golden ale is a mouthful.
I think classic Belgian breweries are the world's best gatekeepers, aren't
they? Yeah, they very much are. But it's always a bit of a grey area. It's a bit of a mouthful, but that's what we call them. They're spontaneously fermented beers, or Lambic style.
Yeah. So it's almost like counterintuitive to kind of brewing in general. Then, in the sense that, I suppose when you're brewing just a normal beer or whatever, it's you want to kind of prevent infections or anything like that. Whereas you're kind of like
opposite end of the spectrum.
Come on in.
Yeah. Invite everyone in. It's completely different. And I think most brewers freak out when they hear about our process and what we do.
Well, I guess that ties into the place you've got here, because when you open up to the environment, you're inviting input and influx from the building itself, right? So the character of the building is going to inform the character of your beers, like you have a Fontaine or you have a Canton, right? So
yes,
it's always going to be your stamp, I guess, because of this building.
Well, yes, in terms of what's been done here, I think in terms of the coolship, so we're a blendery, meaning we don't brew the wort on site here. So Elgood's Brewery, which are a very, very old brewery in Wisbech in Cambridgeshire. They're the second oldest brewery actually in operation in the UK. Amazing old brewery. Like I always say, it's like a working museum. Really, really old brew kit, still in operation. And we brew our wort there, and we use their cooling trays. Right. They're one of the few places left that have operational cooling trays. 2 4,000 litre copper shallow cooling trays. Really amazing place. It is the influence of that brewery, that room, what comes in from the outside that that affects our beer, that makes our beer.
Interesting. So it's a true collaboration at source then, really?
Yes, yeah. And similar to a blendery in Belgium, where you're getting wort from multiple sources. We only get it from one source, but the intention is to get it from other. It's just difficult in the UK because not many people have coolships and can make this type of beer. But yes, the influence is from them, from a microbial standpoint. I think where we put our stamp on the beer is the barrels. The barrels, after multiple uses, will start having an influence on the beer. The wood is porous. The microbes will start living in the pores of the wood. And after multiple turns, so different beers in the barrels that we have, you will then start getting an influence from a microbial standpoint. And then obviously our blending, that's a big thing for us. We're not just using single barrels to make beers. Every beer we make is a blend across multiple barrels. So it's then the skill of the blender to put our stamp on the beer, It's not just get a beer, put it on some fruit, bottle it. Yeah. We're blending everything to try and bring it into balance, but also try and put our stamp on it, make it like it is a crossover blendery beer. Just as the blenders in Belgium, if you try a blendery over there and you're into this type of beer, you'll know who it is who's done it, because that's the stamp they put on it from their blending.
Yeah, and I guess you're always learning. This is not exactly where you're going to end up.
Yeah.
You've probably got a place where you want to be, but I guess the process is always evolving. You're always learning, and you're always adapting.
Massively, yeah. We're still very early in our journey, as it were, and we're already seeing some really interesting progression in terms of how the beer is aging in the barrels. But we need more years under our belt in terms of not only these base beers getting better in barrel, but also our skill as blenders in terms of getting better and better.
Do you ever mix ages?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a big thing of what we do. Not this beer, which we can talk about, which is slightly different to like the normal beers we do. But yes, a big thing for us is blending across the ages. Your 6-month-old beer, your 1-year-old beer, your 2-year-old beer, your 3-year-old beer, they're all very different. And they all have their own personality, their own character. And it's important we find, to incorporate all of these to get an interesting complex beer out the back of it. We're not just
attacked by all the buzzy things.
We're not just doing it to say that we can blend across the years. Like, it is really interesting to use the young, the middle, and the old, because when you can bring them all together, you can produce something really lovely out the back of it.
Yeah. So what are we drinking here? Because it's brilliant, by the way.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is slightly different to what we normally do. So this is, we brew 2 sort of base beers. We do a golden ale, very unlike your golden ale that you might have on cask in the pub. But it follows the Lambic recipe. It's normally 60% malted barley, 40% raw wheat. Then we also do a wheat beer, which is not like your normal wheat beer, which is 30% malted barley, 70% wheat, half of that's malted, half of that's raw. It's a very, very big amount of wheat in the grain bill. A couple of years ago we did it, and out the back of it we got a beer that had a lovely acid line in it. It was nice and light, It was, it had a lot of wheat in. We're big fans of different beer styles and German Gozers, which is like a sour wheat beer. We thought that we could riff off that and we could do something that was a bit more aligned to traditional Gozers of a few hundred years ago, so spontaneously fermented, lightly dry hopped with an experimental British hop from Farham's, CF161. It's supposed to be quite lemony.
Unnamed so far, then.
Unnamed so far, yeah.
We'll invent a name by then.
Yeah. And then a little bit of British sea salt, so it has that saline finish that Gozers traditionally have.
Yeah, I love Gozers. Saltier the better in my opinion. This is great. It's just dry,
very much.
clean.
It's the perfect drink for a Sunday morning.
It really is.
Get you through the morning.
Yeah, I mean that kind of acidity really kind of just like it just cuts through. It's
Lifts
but in
it
a
up.
really nice way.
Yeah.
So this is pretty special.
I mean, it's completely opposite end of the spectrum to what we were drinking last night, which was a 10% Imperial Stout and an 8% Dipper. So they could be further apart from each other. But as Chris said, it's a good breakfast beer.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So there's two of you.
Yes.
So there's you and Charlie.
Yep. Yeah.
So how do you kind of divide the labour, I guess?
Oh, it's just sort of all hands on deck really most of the time. We do all the production together and then every task gets basically split out. But we don't, it's not like one of us has production, one that focuses on sales and marketing.
Right, okay.
We kind of do everything together. It's pretty rudimentary here in terms of the setup, our kit, etc. But we don't need a lot of complicated, expensive stuff.
It's going to be by
do
design,
this.
though, right? Because if you're trying to keep it more traditional, I guess, in your approach, then why do you need, machinery that costs tens of thousands of pounds?
Of course, yeah. And for us, it's like, we're trying to maximise the space in here. We've got a lot of barrels. It takes up a lot of floor space. You might be able to see these are pyramid stacked. So they're stacked very close together. We're not using barrel racks. So you can't get forklift trucks in here. Like everything's tight and close in. And it's very much, of course you can do the work alone, but it's good when both of us are on it, stacking barrels, etc.
How did you get them in? Was this all by hand?
Yeah.
Holy.
Yeah. So we use a hand stacker now, but traditionally we were using ladders and like back breaking, like putting
Health
them
and
up.
safety nightmare.
Yeah, exactly. Probably shouldn't be saying this. We don't harm anyone, so yeah. No, it can be quite sketchy. A lot more comfortable with it now.
Yeah.
We can get a stack up really quickly now, but we do not put them up full. That is a very common question in our tap room. Like, how do you get them up? Do you fill them and lift them? It's just like we use mostly 400 and 500 litre barrels, which 80 to 100 kilograms. You then fill them. It's nearly half a ton. Do not lift them up full. So they go up empty and then we fill them.
Do you go out in search of specific barrels? Are you like, I really want to make something with a, let's say.
We do, yeah, we do. The 95% plus of the stock is ex-wine, 5th or 6th use. We call it neutral French oak. So you're not getting much flavour, if any, from the previous inhabitant. You might get a bit of flavour from the wood, some vanillin, but we want something neutral which isn't going to influence the beer too much. So it's a neutral fermentation vessel. But then on the other side, the very small percentage of barrels, we are looking at like freshly empty barrels. So, port, whiskey, gin, tequila.
So
we use some really
more
interesting stuff.
Experimental stuff, I guess.
Yeah, and that's more finished beer will then go in. So the neutral French oak, you've got unfermented beer going in that will ferment. But, these are a good example. They're from Wye Valley Meadery. So they sent us some freshly emptied mead barrels. And that's, small little experiments to see what influence the previous inhabitant would have. But we've had some lovely results with like gin and tequila. I think they're a little bit more interesting than like whiskey.
I could see those working better than, I guess, the big heavy wine or bourbon kind of barrels.
They're more subtle. Yeah.
It's that sort of dry finish as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
The notes of that would, for example,
Could work quite
impact
well.
this
Yeah.
really well, I should imagine, yeah.
But we've started doing a bit of, we'll put a beer in a freshly emptied whiskey cask, and then we'll integrate a small amount of that into the blends, but not really talk about it. So it can add a different sort of dimension to the beer, but it's not, it still would be a fruit beer, for example, but it can be an interesting addition.
Yeah.
So there are lots of little things that we're trying to play with to just improve the beers, basically. Things that customers wouldn't necessarily really care about or know about, but using different barrels, whether neutral or freshly emptied, we're trying to just work out how we can make the best beer, basically, out of this stuff.
Brilliant.
Do you utilise the term basket vinegar around here?
No, we don't.
How did you get into this beer style? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so we Charlie and I are old friends, very old friends, and one of our best mates' dad used to bring Lambic back from Belgium. I don't know how he got into it, but this was before it was trendy. And it was actually Cantillon he used to bring back, obviously, because he'd go to Brussels. And so we were introduced to it a bit earlier than most people would be. But, it was actually a time when we were getting into beer, but this is like, late teenagers, so it was very early.
Well, that's really interesting, because I'm always fascinated about when people try Lambic or Lambic style beer for the first time, what the reaction is.
Yeah, Charlie loved it off the bat. I was like, what the fuck is this?
was it really sort of spitting it out instantly?
Yeah, because we were like 16, 17, so just getting into drinking Fosters and stuff, but you're still like, you still don't really know what's going on at all. But then it kind of just opened up our minds, really. Then went to uni, really into beer. But when I was at uni, which was many, many years ago, the craft beer scene was only just about kicking off. I was up at Leeds. There wasn't a good beer scene compared to now. There wasn't really a beer scene at all. But we had to really go out to try and find good beers. Couldn't get Lambic much here at all. And then everything just kicked off. Now it's really easy to get Lambic here. But it was more that sort of opened our minds to drinking different stuff, wine, ciders, etc. And then fast forward many, many years, 15, 16 years, we've always enjoyed drinking together. And, I love all types of beer. I love my Casca, I love my other lagers, etc. But we're passionate about this. I don't think we really ever wanted to go and make lagers and pale ales, and I don't think we would have left our jobs and gone into this if that was the aim. The aim was to do something we were really, really passionate about, and that's what these beers are. I mean, it wasn't that advisable. Neither of us are from a beer background or a wine background. Although we might really enjoy it and drink a lot of it and be really into the scene, we weren't in it from a professional standpoint. So that was and is a massive challenge. We're still learning a lot, but having spoken to a lot of people before we set it up, everyone's advice was just do it yourself, because you're the person who's really passionate about it. You'll learn from your mistakes.
My next question was going to be about your background. Was there any science background? Because obviously it sounds very technical.
It can be. We're very romantic about it and don't really test anything.
I think you kind of have to be with this style, though.
Yeah.
Right?
No, we don't. Everyone's always like, why don't you just get it tested? It's not that expensive, and you can go and send it to a lab. But I always think about it like we're trying to learn through tasting. So if I know what's in there, I think that could influence my palate a bit. Yeah. And we know we get Pediococcus, which is a lactic acid producing bacteria. This beer went ropey, meaning you've got Pediococcus. So it'll get gloopy, saliva-like, and it'll fix itself after a couple of weeks. Yep. Pediococcus, it's lovely, soft lactic acidity. I think a bit softer than lactobacillus, lactic acid. And we just learn that now by knowing that we get ropiness in the beers rather than going and get tested. And Brett's development is something we're learning through tasting and tasting. I don't know what strains of Brettanomyces we have in the beer, but I kind of just want to learn through always tasting.
I think it's probably not the most commercially minded approach to it, but I think it'd probably lose a little bit of the romance about it if you start getting too scientific about this style of production.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? It feels like it needs to be a little bit more authentic and done on, I guess, your approach and your gut feeling as a blender, as opposed to going, we need to sort of maintain levels or KPIs or something ridiculous like that.
I think you're right. It's a bit of a reaction against, I guess, normal beer, and not only in the process, but also the mad, crazy flavour profiles you have in these beers. And it's like the antithesis of it. And to then get hyper technical about it, again, if someone were to do it, I'd have nothing against. That's just their method and their approach. But to get really, really technical about it, kind of seems like you're going against what this is all about, which is a fully hands-off process. And that's not to say, we don't take it very seriously in terms of our sanitation, etc. And we have had barrels that have gone off.
Yeah.
And we do know what to look for if a barrel is going south, as it were. But touch wood, we haven't had many big issues. But
Correct.
we are tasting the beer a lot, and we're trying to look after it. And we're topping up certain barrels in terms of trying to avoid excess headspace. We're trying to keep an eye on things if there are some certain flavours coming in that we're not happy with. And we're trying to be very, very careful in terms of if there is a little issue with the blend, like you're not packaging it, you're not getting it out because although people can hide behind the fact that these beers are crazy in their flavours, you can still get bad off flavours in the beers, and we don't want certain things to be in there, and we're not just making something really funky and wild that actually tastes like shit.
You've still got a responsibility to the style in that sense. You've got to.
So inspiration. Obviously, I think we know which country is probably inspiring you the most. But who do you look up to?
Definitely some Lambic producers that we look up to in terms of the quality of beer they're producing. But also, British producers as well. Like we've got a really good little mixed fermentation scene in the UK, and some US producers, of course.
Who do you rate in the UK?
So I really like Johnny Mills's stuff. I think he produces some lovely beers. Balance up in Manchester doing some really good stuff.
And I'm not trying any of Balance actually, but I've heard good
they've got set up this really cool tap room. I really want to go up there. They've very kindly got a keg of ours on up there.
Nice.
We've been talking to them since the beginning. We helped them get some barrels because very easy to get barrels in this country. We've got so much whiskey, but sorry, not in this country, in the UK. But if you want to get the wine barrels, you've got to get some over in it. It's good to group with other people to try and reduce the cost, basically. The Little Earth Project, not too far away from here in Suffolk, and they've been doing it way before us. Because there are not many people who are really focusing on this type of beer 100%. You've got bigger breweries, they've got side projects who might be producing some quite nice beer. But people doing it 100%, only probably 5 of us probably in the UK, maybe a few more.
It's a small scene.
It's a small scene.
Yeah.
But I think everyone's carving their own path and doing very different beers, and everyone's got their own little area within that.
Yeah.
And I think that's fantastic because although there might not be a lot of us, everyone's kind of putting their own stamp on it, producing something very different. And I think that's a lovely thing about our scene.
It feels here though, there's obviously a bigger nod to the heritage of this style of beer, for sure, just in the location and the style of beer and how you produce the beer.
Yeah.
So what's next for Crossover?
Ooh, big question. Well, continue to try and improve our blends. Like this year we're still being experimental. I mean, everything we're doing is experimental, but we're really focusing on what fruits we think are really good. We work with lots of really good fruit growers up and down the country. We always have a direct relationship with them. We're now 4 fruit seasons in. Stuff we're really interested in, it's like apricot. Yep. People don't really realise we grow them in this country. We've got a great grower called God's Hill Orchards in the Isle of Wight. Amazing apricots. We've got them 2 years in a row. This is our 3rd year getting them. Really beautiful fruit.
You're saying on the right words. I mean, apricot in this style of beer is just
amazing.
It's my favourite thing in the world. Right?
I think it is for me as well. I think it surpasses other fruits by quite a long way in not only how it marries with the base beer, but just the character of the apricot and the flavour of the apricot. It's just so fresh and delicious. Cherry's a big one. We're still trying to get cherries right. This year's been really bad for cherries, harvest-wise. We use Morello cherries, sour cherry. I think it's a little inferior to some of the foreign cherries, sour cherries that are being used.
Is that because of the product itself, or we've just had a bad
I think it's the fruit itself. I think the fruit itself.
Okay.
It doesn't have the depth of character of like Stevensbar cherry from Denmark or the Scarbeek from Belgium.
Right. Okay.
And those are 2 quite popular cherries within the Lambic and wild ale scene. So that's something we're working around, but I think we've worked out a good way of using Morellos, but also bringing a depth to them. I mean, we use a lot of different fruits, plums, raspberries, blackberries, tayberries, which are a really good one we get from a place called Maynard's in East Sussex, really cool fruit farm. We're doing a very, very small batch of a mulberry beer this year.
Wow.
Ooh.
I've never seen because they got a really long picking window, and
when is this going to be ready?
well, it's
For selfish reasons.
Yeah, no, there's gonna be like 20-litre batch, so I don't know if it'll actually make it out of basically the tap room, and maybe just Charlie and I'll probably drink them ourselves. But we got 7 kg this year, which is crazy, and we're working on tons now for fruit. So 7 kg is a very small amount. It'll be interesting to see how the beer comes out, but if that's been like a holy grail for us in terms of fruit. So, but this year we're using peaches and nectarines grown in Kent, which is the first time they've come onto the market, commercially.
Oh, awesome.
Another fruit people have no idea that they grow in the UK, but there's only one grower doing it. So we really hope we can get something good out of them because, again, they can work really well. They're not quite as easy as apricots, but we've got a lot of them, so we're hoping we can get something good out the back of it. But yes, the focus is still British fruit. We're trying to focus on British ingredients, British fruit, and really promote the varieties that we're using and how they can work with our beer.
Very sustainable from that point of view, like you're trying to locally source, or at the very least source from, within the country, in an industry where obviously the foreign hops are the big ones, people are bringing in stuff from New Zealand, America. It's nice to see a focus in a beer style that is on, British ingredients.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That's been a big thing for us, and we're a tiny voice in the market. But yes, like if we can zero in more on the British ingredient side, then yes, there is a big argument for sustainability there because they don't have air miles on them.
We'd like to finish off with some questions, some quick fire questions.
Cool. Is this one word answer or what we?
No, you can elaborate if you want.
Okay.
Not at all. If you could collaborate with any other brewery or blendery, who would it be?
Oh, that's a big question. I mean, I think it would be cool to do it with one of the Lambic guys, just because we've been very inspired by what they're doing. It's very hard collaborating with this type of beer. It's a long-term thing. We can't just fire out collaborations.
That's the sensible answer.
Yeah. Basically, not answer your question.
But the fancy answer would be.
I really want to do some cask ale. This stuff. So any old cask ale brewery that we like, maybe we could look at doing something. Should just do it with Elgers because they make it all work. That would be the easy thing.
There's the pitch.
Favourite country for beer? I mean, I think this is probably...
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's Belgium. I think the US is good. I've never been to the US, Charlie has, and it's a good scene out there. But for me, it's definitely Belgium. Yeah, I love the saisons of northern France and South Belgium as well. So it's got to be that for me.
What's your favourite style of beer, other than what you make here?
So I think like a light cask ale is probably the most I drink outside of this, and whether that be like a local brewery to here or anything nice and fresh and local they've got in the pub is what I'll go to. I love pubs, and it's something I've always been in, even when I was younger. It's a big part of me getting into drinking is pubs, and obviously our culture and our heritage in this country.
Final question, perhaps the most important one, is who's your favourite member of the Wu-Tang Clan?
What's the crazy guy who goes like off on one? He did that song with Mariah Carey.
You've got ODB again, haven't you?
Don't Bastards. Yeah, I love him.
That's what Baron chose as well. Yeah.
He's crazy, but I love his
stuff. He's the only one he could remember. So.
Yeah. No, I love Wu-Tang.
One day we'll get a Capadonna as the answer. But
there's a lot of them though, isn't there?
Yeah, there's too many.
Travelling circus. So I can't. Yeah. Oh no, who's there are two of them that have similar names.
Yeah.
RZA and Jizza.
RZA. Yeah, he's good.
RZA.
But it is the main man. We all know that. I don't know where this Wu-Tang thing's come from. All of
it just seems to... The pipe dream for you. You've always wanted to kind of include more Wu-Tang in the...
Chris wouldn't let me do a Wu-Tang Clan YouTube channel.
No, we're focusing on craft beer.
Okay, fair enough. That's second best.
I wish we could play more Wu-Tang here, but I think we offend a lot of people in the chat room.